We may be almost through the first week of October here in Zone 6B, Western Maryland. But there's still gardening stuff going on and gardening stuff to be done. Today, I'm just kind of gonna go through and reutilize the old cucamelon bed. Got a bunch of little cucamelons laying around in here that had fallen off the vine, a few weeds, and there were also some onions in here that I had planted early in the season, but they got smothered up really quick by the cucamelons, by the vines. They kind of got covered over. But when I took the vines out, some of the onions that hadn't come up yet, that I haven't already pulled, now have started sprouting again. So I think I'm just going to leave them in here and leave them maybe through the winter and let them grow up through next spring. I don't know, we'll see what happens. You can let your onions, if you don't pull them all, you can always let them go until next year and then use them for seed if you are so inclined. So, get some of these other cucamelon roots and stuff out of here. But I'm gonna put garlic in here in this bed. But yeah, welcome back to One Seed, One World. Checking out another video. So I'm planting this in Chilean red garlic. This is one of the ones I planted last year. And I think this is a hardneck variety. And this is a good time of year to start planting your garlic. You know, end of September. I mean, it really depends on your growing zone. Some of you may have already been in the frost stages and whatnot, but for zone 6 and lower, well, I say and lower, I mean, if it's really warm, if you're down south somewhere, then you may not be ready yet to get into the garlic stage. But for like this mid-Atlantic region, or anywhere across, you know, zone 6, September, October, good time to plant your garlic. And basically what you're looking for is, you know, I've seen some people question when your garlic, or once they planted garlic, they get worried because, you know, it started to sprout and, you know, frost is coming and they're not sure if they should cover it up or whatnot. But really, that's okay. I mean, garlic is something that you're going to grow over the winter, and you want some sprouts early on. In fact, the higher your greens get before Christmas Day, then the stronger your overall garlic bulbs will be, and you know, to make it through the winter. It gives them some good, a good head start to get going on before the heavy winter comes and really you get a deep freeze. And then once you get your garlic in the ground, and whatnot, you can put some mulch or some straw over top to help protect it, depending on whether you're doing a soft neck or hard neck. But both varieties, or both types of garlic, whether it's hard neck or soft neck, will benefit from some mulching, either with straw or wood mulch or what have you. So I'm just going to get my garlic in here today, and I'm going to post a link too. I had done a more in-depth video last fall on planting garlic and spacing and all that kind of thing, so I'll post a link for that down below. But I'm not getting quite as particular this year as I did last year with my spacing method and my little hack that I used last year. This year we're just going to start sticking some bulbs in the ground, and I'm just loosening up the soil a little bit here to get things going. Oh, if you don't watch the other video, when you plant your garlic, you want the little pointy end on the top, want that sticking up, and then where like the root base is, the little round spot on the end. Let me show you here. So this is a section here that you'll want pointing down in the ground, and this will be sticking up. And one thing I did last year, when I was making the video, I wasn't quite paying attention to what I was doing. And I had stuck multiple garlic cloves into one hole. And so those didn't come out so great. They didn't have enough room to grow. They were really tiny. So this year I'm trying to make sure, even though I'm making a video here, to pay attention to only put one per hole. And these I'm spacing out a lot more than the ones I did last year too. Wow. So this is cucamelon, tuber and root that comes down, and actually with cucamelons you can actually overwinter these. Like, you can pull this up like I did here and save this, replant it again next year, it will grow back. I don't really do that. I always start from seed and just go from there, because you know, they have to have the right conditions and everything when you're keeping them inside. But if you keep them in a cool, dark place, covered probably like in sand or something like that, you can save these great big long tubers and restart your cucamelons that way if you're so inclined. So this bed behind me now has all got the garlic in it. I pulled out a couple of the onions, the small ones that didn't have any green tops coming up. We can use those. And because I spaced these out a lot more than I did last year, I still have a ½ pound of garlic I haven't even got to yet. So I might have to find some other areas to stick them in here and there. You know, but you won't be harvesting, or when you plant garlic, you don't normally harvest those till midsummer. So make sure you pick an area that you are okay with not using in the spring to plant something, you know, in that particular area. So let's go take a look at the other area where my garlic used to be, which is now full of Tromboncino squash. So this area up here behind me, I've showed you some of this, you know, before on some other videos, but this first bed here next to me was carrots and some peas, and then the other side was all of where my garlic last year was. So when I harvested the garlic in June, July, somewhere in there, I think it was like around the 4th of July or so that I harvested it, I went ahead and put in just a small bed of Tromboncino. Just put in 3 seeds. It has now filled this whole area that we were just looking at, and we've already harvested Tromboncino, and there's Tromboncino. Anyway, there's still a lot more squash coming in. We're still, from the forecast, we're still at least 2 weeks or more out from first frost, which is kind of odd for this kind of year. I mean, this time of year, normally by October, we're starting to get some pretty cold nights. We've had some nights in the 40s, but most nights were in the 50s and 60s, and during the day we're like mid to high 70s. So after a very long hot summer, it has continued into the fall, and there's some benefits to that because I can keep growing things and keep harvesting things, and some plants still keep going, like the squash. Most of the tomatoes in the back part of the garden have died off. There's still a few coming in. But most of this part of the garden is kind of done its thing, whereas the front garden is still producing. That was the beds that I put in later in the summer. And so a lot of that stuff didn't even get planted until near the end of July. Anyway, today Mitzi and I were walking around just looking at some things, and Mitzi noticed a monster Tromboncino growing out here that these vines they've expanded off into the grapevines and whatnot, and have grown up over the fencing that I put in for the grapes last year. But there is a huge Tromboncino squash growing there that we're going to cut today, and take a look at this thing. It's insane. So I don't know how good you'll be able to see it here, but this is it hanging back here on the vine. It's kind of hidden back in there amongst the grapes and the Tromboncino actual vines, but it's pretty massive back in there. So I'm gonna go cut this bad boy out so we can take a look. So hopefully my trusty clippers will get this out. As big as this thing is, I almost feel like I'm gonna need a chainsaw. But actually the stem itself is normal size. Holy cow. Now that's a Tromboncino. That's awesome. In the army. All right, anyway. So, you know, with the Tromboncino, they are kind of like a zucchini if you pick them young, with flavor and their tenderness. But they're also kind of like butternut squash, where if you let them stay on the vine, they'll start turning more of a beige color, and they can harden off just like a winter squash. And I mentioned that earlier this year, but I now have some that are kind of getting that beige color, and I'll show you one of these here. Yeah, got one in there I can show you. Well, we got the monster. So there's one growing in there that's starting to turn the beige color, and that will harden off more like a butternut squash, and it will also more enhance the flavor to give it more of that sweet, nutty butternut squash flavor, instead of like more of the zucchini type flavor that you would get earlier in the season. So see this bed here? This is the video I did a couple weeks ago, or yeah, I think it was a couple weeks ago, maybe a little bit longer, I don't remember. Anyway, where I was planting the lettuce for the fall. This whole bed, within 4 days, was a mass of lettuce, sprouts, leaves. They were real little, but they all, I mean, the whole bed was just this gorgeous mass of the lettuce, the Rocky Top, Rocky Mountain lettuce mix, one of those. So anyway, all just came up perfectly, was starting to grow. And I came out a few days later and there were chunks of it missing. The local resident wild rabbit that lives in our yard, actually there's 2 of them that I see out here. Normally 1 in the back area though. He got in here and started eating on it. And each day that I came out, there was a little bit less. And yesterday, I still had one type of almost like a butter crunch looking lettuce, was one of the mixes that was in here. That was all that was left. All the dark green stuff was gone. Now I come out here today, the rest of it has been eaten off. I don't have a single bit of lettuce shoots coming up at all. Remember I mentioned on the video, I was like, maybe it'll be a success and maybe it'll come up and the rabbits will eat it all. Well, the rabbits ate it all. So, lesson learned is on these shorter beds that I have, not to plant things like lettuce, because the rabbits can easily hop right up into here. Whereas on my taller beds, while a rabbit will get in there once in a while, most of the time they stay away from those. So I'm gonna plant some more lettuce in trays in the greenhouse and do some tests that way. But I won't plant any more out here. Actually now, I mean, that they've sheared this all off and there's just a couple onions left in here, and I've got another ½ pound of garlic. Maybe I'll put garlic in here. I don't know if I want to take up two beds for garlic though, because then I wouldn't be able to plant anything in both of those 2 4x8 or 4x8 foot beds until, you know, midsummer. and I don't know if I want to give up a second bed for that. So I'll have to decide how I want to do that. But one other thing I wanted to show you. Giant Tromboncino. See this thing? Okay, let's move on. A lot more of the scarlet runner bean vines are now turning brown. They're kind of starting to die off, which is what we're looking for. Still have a lot of nice big green pods here though, but then there's other ones in the back that have started to brown out and are now drying out, which is what we're looking for. I've already showed you these beans before, but one thing I really like about these too, besides that they're just so tasty and so beautiful, is they're super easy to shell once they dry out, compared to like the long beans, where when you save those for drying, those take forever to shell out because they're so small and just thin, whereas these pop open really easy. So the long beans, like I just mentioned, first I probably got about, off these 2 hoops, I harvested about 15 pounds and blanched and froze them this year. And then I could have got more if I had kept picking them, but the rest I wanted to let go and just kind of grow out, dry out, and then I can shell these. So there's some brown ones in here mixed with still green ones. I mean, actually I could pull these green ones and cook these up and eat them right away, but I'm gonna let them all get to the dry brown stage and then shell all these. And then, you know, because they're a dual purpose bean, you can use them for a dried bean or for like a fresh snap bean. Then I'll get a good batch of dried beans for putting in soups and stuff, or saving to plant next year. And so, you know, it's kind of a nice mix. But we're getting to that point of the season now in October where the ones that I've let go are all starting to dry out. My path of zinnias, you know, is now they're getting late in the season. So there are some new buds coming on, but a lot of them have died off. The plants got really tall, they're falling over, and in fact there's a couple spots here you know, along my pathway that I can't even walk through because they've drooped over so much. But there's still a lot of pretty blossoms out here. We still get bees and butterflies and whatnot, although they're much less prevalent now than they were even just a few weeks ago. You know, as the season wanes on, you know, some of the insects and stuff start preparing for their winter things, and there's less of them out doing their harvesting, pollinating things. So, but you know, there's still some beauty here with even though some of it's dying off, they're falling over, there's still a lot of color mixed in here. And even around the side, I've got some celosia and coxcomb that is still looking pretty good for this time of the year. And since, you know, it's staying warmer later this year, this fall, yeah, even in October, we've got some blooms going on. So up here in the front garden, these plants are much more healthy and flourishing looking, because these were the ones that weren't put in until near the end of July after I finished building these beds. I mean, I have a ton of eggplant over here, bell peppers, Anaheim, shishitos coming in, and then the tomato plants are super healthy looking compared to the ones that are dying off in the back. But one thing with tomatoes this time of year, you know, tomatoes like warmer temperatures for both producing the fruit and then getting your tomatoes to turn the proper color, whether you're, you know, doing something like an orange peach, your general red tomato, Cherokee purple, black crim, you know, there's the different colors, but for them to actually ripen and mature, you want something that's like 75 degrees and above. Preferably, I think more of an optimal temperature is probably in the mid to low 80s. And then that's kind of a good range for your tomatoes to keep producing blossoms and getting the fruit to ripen. But this time of year, we don't have days in the 80s. We're in the 70s, and like I mentioned, you know, it's a little bit cooler at night, 50s, 60s. And so while I do have some beautiful looking foliage, the amount of tomatoes I'm getting is kind of weak. There are some in here, and some I've even got some really big, nice looking tomatoes in here. Got some Romas in on this side, but they're not turning colors. And so to counteract the cooler temperatures outside, What I will do is pick these all as green tomatoes, bring them in, and they will slowly ripen in the house. And if you are in a place where you still have tomatoes that are out in your garden and are green, and you have a frost getting ready to come in, pick all your green tomatoes, take them inside. They'll ripen inside, you know, on your porch, on your basement, someplace where it's above freezing. Because once you get a freeze, that's gonna ruin anything that you have left. So you can save all your green tomato crop and ripen them inside. And depending on how many you have, you could possibly still be eating those tomatoes, you know, up until Christmas time or even later, depending on how you store them and if you have enough room for all that. And so that's kind of my plan here. I'm gonna, while we're still having these semi-warm days and evenings, but no frost, I'll let them to continue to stay out here on the vine. And then at one point I'll just come through and pick everything green and put them in the basement to ripen them up so that we can eat them as fall and winter progresses. So down these rows are there's a lot of eggplants still on this side. This is all peppers. I have, like I mentioned before, a mix of shishito, Anaheim, bell, and even a couple of poblanos. Oh, and there's a couple fish pepper plants in here too. My next video that I'm going to do is going to be all about shishitos. We'll talk a little bit about them and their history, as well as we're going to grill some up and maybe even do some in the oven with some goat cheese. So take a look for that over the next few days. But you know, the peppers are producing madly right now, and I'm happy to have the warmer temperature this late in the fall, where instead of being out here in a sweatshirt and cleaning out beds, I'm out here harvesting peppers. So, you know, I'll take what Mother Nature gives me this year. Okay, so that was just a quick garden update to show you kind of how things are progressing throughout this part of the fall. First week of October, things are still coming in to some points, and then replacing some of the beds with some other things to plant in the winter. Still got kale in here, turnips, and a few other things that do better with the cooler weather as well. And so, you know, I'm happy to still be outside and enjoying the nice weather these days. And one last note is that, did you see my giant Tromboncino? Look at it. Look at it. It's huge. Okay, so just very proud of that. But I hope you guys are still enjoying some good weather in your areas and are still able to harvest things, or maybe you're planting some of the fall garden things like, you know, kale and radishes. Maybe you planted some beets earlier that are starting to show some promise. Cabbage, there's, you know, bok choy. There's different things that you can still maybe be planting depending on your growing zone and where you're looking at with frost and all that. And if not, you know, you can always do some things inside, or if you're lucky enough to have a greenhouse, then you might be able to extend your season even further. But whatever's going on in your neck of the woods, you know, in your greenhouses and your gardens, chicken coops, whatever it is that you're doing, hope it's all coming out fantastic for you. And I hope you're having a fantastic day. Please subscribe to our channel. We will see you again soon. Namaste, everybody. Tromboncino. Woo! All right. I gotta find a fire big enough to cook this on.